The invitation was embossed in gold, heavy enough to feel like a weapon. It was an invite to my parents' 30th anniversary gala, to be held at the Vesper Heights estate, the most expensive private residence in the city. My name is Sloan, and for 15 years, I have been the family failure. While my brother Caspian was being groomed to take over the family's prestigious architecture firm, I was the daughter who wasted her life. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't marry a senator's son. Instead, I moved out at 18 with nothing but a used laptop and a relentless drive to understand real estate markets that my father, Garrick, called low-class gambling. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my modest apartment, adjusting a vintage black dress. My parents didn't know I lived here. They didn't even know I was in the city. For 15 years, our only communication had been a yearly checkup call from my mother, Helena, which usually consisted of her reminding me how much of a disappointment I was compared to Caspian. "You should come to the gala, Sloan," Helena had said over the phone last week, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "It might be your last chance to see the estate. We've finally moved into Vesper Heights. It's the pinnacle of our success. Perhaps seeing how real winners live will finally motivate you to get a real job." I smiled to myself, a cold, sharp feeling in my chest. If only she knew. I arrived at Vesper Heights as the sun was setting, the limestone walls of the mansion glowing like a monument to greed. Valets in white gloves took the keys to Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I walked up the grand staircase, my heels clicking against the marble. The moment I entered the ballroom, the whispers started. "Is that Sloan?" I heard a cousin murmur. "I heard she's working as a freelance clerk or something. Look at that dress. It looks like it's from a thrift store." I ignored them and walked straight toward the head table where my parents sat, flanked by Caspian. My brother looked smug, holding a glass of champagne as if he had built the house with his own hands. "Sloan," my father Garrick said, not even standing up. "You actually showed up. I'm surprised you could afford the taxi ride out here." "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Dad," I said, my voice calm. "The house is impressive." "Impressive?" Caspian barked a laugh. "It's the crown jewel of the Blackwood Holding Group. We've been leasing it for 2 years, and tonight we're announcing that we've finally secured the option to buy. It's a $100 million deal, Sloan, something you wouldn't understand in a lifetime of freelancing." "Leasing?" I raised an eyebrow. "I thought you owned it." "In this world, image is everything," Helena whispered, leaning in. "By leasing first, we proved our worth to the owners. And tonight, the mysterious landlord is supposed to send a representative to sign the final transfer. It's the greatest day in the history of this family." "I see," I said, taking a sip of water. "And what happens if the landlord doesn't want to sell?" Garrick laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Money talks, Sloan. Something a failure like you doesn't realize. Now, go find a seat in the back. The press is arriving soon, and we don't want the unsuccessful branch of the family in the primary photos." I walked away, but I didn't go to the back. I went to the library, where a man in a sharp gray suit was waiting for me. It was Silas, my lead legal counsel for the last 7 years. "The papers are ready, Ms. Blackwood," Silas said, handing me a leather-bound folder. The lease agreement for Garrick and Helena Blackwood officially expired at midnight. They missed the clause for the purchase option by exactly 48 hours because they were too busy spending the deposit on this party. I looked at the folder. Inside was the deed to Vesper Heights, held under my corporate shell name, SB Global Investments. "They're about to make the announcement," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "They're going to tell the world they own this house." "Then I suggest we go back out there," Silas said with a thin smile. "It's time to show them that the family failure hasn't just been working. She's been collecting." I stepped back into the ballroom just as my father took the stage, the microphone humming to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Garrick announced, his voice booming with pride, "tonight we celebrate 30 years of excellence. And to mark this occasion, I am proud to announce that the Blackwood family is now the permanent owner of Vesper Heights." The crowd erupted in applause. My mother was beaming, her diamonds flashing under the chandeliers. "Actually, Dad?" I said, my voice amplified by the secondary microphone Silas had just handed me from the sound booth. "The owner of Vesper Heights has a different announcement to make." The room went dead silent. 1,000 eyes turned toward me, the girl in the simple black dress standing in the middle of the room. "Sloane?" Helena hissed, her face turning a deep shade of red. "What are you doing? Sit down." "I can't sit down, Mom," I said, walking slowly toward the stage. "Because as of 5 minutes ago, you're officially trespassing in my living room." The silence in the ballroom was so heavy, you could hear the individual bubbles popping in the champagne glasses. My father's hand, still clutching the microphone, began to tremble. My mother, Helena, looked like she had seen a ghost, her socialite mask finally cracking to reveal the panic underneath. "Sloane, stop this nonsense immediately," my father growled, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "This is a private celebration. You're making a fool of yourself in front of the most influential people in the city." "I'm not the one making a fool of myself, Garrick," I said, stepping onto the edge of the stage. "You just told a room full of investors and journalists that you bought a house you don't even have the keys to anymore." Caspian, my golden brother, stepped forward, his face flushed with rage. "You're delusional. We've been dealing with SB Global Investments for 2 years. They are a multi-billion-dollar real estate firm based out of Singapore. You're a freelance clerk who couldn't even afford a ticket to the gala if we hadn't sent you one out of pity." I looked at Silas, who was standing at the base of the stage. He opened the leather-bound folder and pulled out a single document, the original Articles of Incorporation for SB Global. He handed it to the nearest journalist, a woman from the Financial Times who had been invited to cover the big merger. "Read the signature at the bottom," Silas said calmly. The journalist squinted at the paper. Her eyes widened. "The CEO and sole shareholder of SB Global Investments is Sloane Blackwood, registered 15 years ago." A collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother nearly fainted, clutching the back of a silk-covered chair for support. 15 years? Helena whispered. "That's when you left. When you said you were going to work at that library." "I didn't work at the library, Mom," I said, looking her in the eye. "I spent my days at the library using their free high-speed internet to trade penny stocks and study the foreclosure markets you called low class. While Caspian was busy spending his allowance on yacht parties, I was buying up distressed debt in the neighborhoods you wouldn't even drive through. I started small. A studio apartment, a duplex, a small office building. And then, 10 years ago, I bought the debt on your firm." Garrick's face went from red to a ghostly translucent white. Our firm is doing fine. We have projects all over the coast." "Projects funded by loans that I now own," I countered. "You've been over-leveraged for a decade, Dad. You lived on credit, pretending to be a titan while you were drowning in interest. 2 years ago, when you wanted to lease Vesper Heights to save your image, you didn't realize that the mysterious landlord offering you a deal was the daughter you disowned." You trapped us," Caspian hissed, his hands balled into fists. "I didn't trap you. I gave you a chance," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "The lease agreement was fair. It gave you 2 years to get your finances in order. But instead of saving the firm, you spent the company's remaining cash on this gala, hoping that owning this house would trick investors into giving you one last loan. But the option to buy expired at midnight, and you missed the payment." Garrick looked at the contract on the podium, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. It was just 48 hours. We have the money. We were going to transfer it tomorrow." "In real estate, 48 hours is a lifetime," I said. "And as for the money, I checked your accounts this morning through the bank I also happens to be a major shareholder of. You don't have the 100 million, Garrick. You don't even have the 1 million for next month's rent." I turned to Silas. "Issue the formal notice." Silas stepped onto the stage and handed my father a thick, red-stamped envelope. "This is an official notice of lease termination and immediate vacancy. Since the purchase option has been forfeited, the owner, Ms. Sloane Blackwood, is reclaiming the property. You and your guests have until the end of this event to vacate. The locks will be changed at 6 a.m. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Journalists were typing furiously on their phones. Investors were walking away from my father as if he were radioactive. The family failure was standing in the center of the storm, perfectly calm. "Where are we supposed to go?" Helena cried, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "This is our home. Everything we have is here." No, Mom, I said, stepping off the stage and walking toward the grand exit. This was my investment. Your home is wherever you can afford to go next. I hear there are some very nice studio apartments in the district I used to live in. If you need a recommendation, let me know. I'm the landlord there, too. As I walked out of the Vesper Heights estate, I didn't feel the weight of 15 years of shame anymore. I felt the cool night air on my face and the solid weight of the truth in my pocket. The gala wasn't over, but the reign of the Blackwoods was, and I was just getting started. The following morning, the sun rose over a different world. The headlines were savage. The Blackwood Mirage, a dynasty built on rented dreams. I stood in the master study of Vesper Heights, a room my father had occupied for 2 years but never truly owned. I was looking at a hidden compartment behind the built-in bookshelves that Silas had discovered during the midnight sweep. They aren't going quietly, Sloane, Silas said, stepping into the room. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Garrick filed an emergency injunction at 8 a.m. He's claiming predatory leasing and emotional distress. He's trying to argue that because you are his daughter, the contract was a form of familial fraud. I didn't turn around. I was staring at a stack of old, yellowed architectural blueprints I'd found in the wall. Let him try. My legal name hasn't been Blackwood on any corporate document for a decade. I've been S.B. Sterling since I was 20. He disowned me so thoroughly he didn't even realize he was signing a contract with his own blood. It's not just the injunction, Silas continued, dropping a folder on the desk. Caspian is reaching out to your old investors. He's trying to paint you as a vengeful daughter who is out to destroy a legacy firm. He's attempting to trigger a morality clause in your primary bank's charter to freeze your liquidity. I finally turned, a cold smile touching my lips. Caspian always was better at PR than at actual architecture, but he's playing a game he doesn't understand. He thinks this is about a house. He thinks this is about a party. He still doesn't realize why I bought this specific estate. I tapped the blueprints on the desk. Look at the dates on these, Silas. These aren't the plans for Vesper Heights. These are the original designs for the Grand Central Plaza, the project that made my father a legend 30 years ago. Silas leaned in, frowning. Wait, these designs. The signature at the bottom isn't your father's. Exactly, I whispered. It's signed by Elias Thorne, the man who was my father's partner before he mysteriously passed away right before the project broke ground. My father didn't build his legacy. He stole it. He used the insurance payout from Elias's death to build this very house. This estate isn't a trophy. It's a tomb built on a crime. The intercom buzzed. It was the front gate security. Ms. Sterling, your parents and brother are at the gate. They have a sheriff with them and a court order. Let them in, I said, my voice like ice. It's time we had a real family meeting. 10 minutes later, Garrick, Helena, and Caspian marched into the study. Garrick looked disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, but he was wielding a piece of paper like a sword. I have the injunction, Sloane, he roared. The sheriff is downstairs. You have 1 hour to vacate this premises. You can't just evict your own parents because of a clerical error on a lease. The judge was appalled. The judge only heard your side of the story, Garrick, I said, sitting behind the desk, the very desk he used to sit behind when he told me I would never amount to anything. And he certainly hasn't seen what I found in your wall this morning. I slid the yellowed blueprints across the mahogany surface. Garrick's face went from an angry red to a pale, sickly gray in a matter of seconds. He reached out to grab the papers, but Silas moved faster, pinning them down. Elias Thorne, I said, the name hanging in the air like a death sentence. You told me he died of a heart attack, but the private investigator I hired 5 years ago found a different story. He found that you bribed the coroner. And these blueprints? They prove that every award you've won for the last 30 years belongs to a dead man. You can't prove anything, Helena stammered, her voice trembling. That was decades ago. It's irrelevant to the lease. It's very relevant to the morality clause. Caspian is trying to trigger, I said, turning to my brother. Caspian, if you send that letter to my bank, I will send these blueprints and the coroner's testimony to the district attorney. I'll let the world know that the Blackwood legacy is a 30-year fraud. Dad won't just lose the house. He'll lose his license, his reputation, and quite possibly his freedom. Caspian looked at our father, then at the blueprints. The loyalty he'd felt was clearly evaporating, replaced by the survival instinct I'd learned in the streets. "Sloan, please," Helena pleaded, tears finally genuine as they tracked through her expensive makeup. "We're your family. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have called you a failure. Just give us a chance to fix this." "You had 15 years to fix it, Mom," I said. "You had 15 years of my birthdays, my graduations, and my struggles to reach out. But you only want to fix it now because the walls are closing in." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the gardens. "Here is the deal. Garrick, you will drop the injunction. You will announce your retirement from the firm effective immediately. You will transfer all remaining assets to a trust for the employees you were planning to lay off. In exchange, these blueprints stay in this room. And you? You get to move into that studio apartment I mentioned. It's small, but the rent is fair." "And me?" Caspian asked, his voice hollow. "You're an architect, Caspian," I said, not looking back. "Go build something that actually belongs to you for once. Without Dad's name, without my money. Let's see if you're actually as good as the press says you are." "This is cold, Sloan," Garrick whispered, his voice broken. "Even for you." "I learned from the best, Dad," I replied. "Now the sheriff is waiting. Go tell him there's been a misunderstanding, and don't forget to leave the keys on the way out." As they walked out, defeated and silenced, I realized the house felt bigger. The ghosts of my father's lies were finally being cleared out. But as Silas started to pack the files, he looked at me with a concerned expression. "You know they'll try something else," he warned. "Men like your father don't just disappear into studio apartments." "I know," I said, looking at the city skyline in the distance. "But he forgot one thing. I'm not just his landlord anymore. I'm the person who knows where all the bodies are buried. And in this city, that makes me the queen." The studio apartment my parents moved into was a masterpiece of irony. It was located in the old Foundry district, overlooking a construction site for a project they had once called a stain on the city. I sat in the back seat of my car, watching through the tinted glass as my mother, Helena, struggled with a grocery bag while walking toward the rusted elevator. For the first time, she wasn't wearing pearls. She was wearing a look of sheer, exhausted reality. "They've been there for 2 weeks," Silas said, closing his laptop. "Garrick hasn't left the room. He's spent the entire time staring at the wall. But Caspian has been busy. He wasn't at the apartment this morning." "Where is he?" I asked, my eyes still on my mother as she disappeared into the building. "He was spotted at the Highland Club," Silas replied, his voice dropping an octave. "He was having lunch with Victor Thorne." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the car's air conditioning. "Victor Thorne? Elias's son." "The very same," Silas confirmed. "He's been living in Europe for 20 years, building a rival firm. He's wealthy, he's bitter, and he's just landed in the city. If Caspian told him about those blueprints we found in the wall, if he told him his father was potentially murdered for a design, then Victor isn't just coming for the house," I finished. "He's coming for blood, and he'll use Caspian to get it." I realized then that my perfect revenge had left a flank exposed. By stripping my father of his power, I had made him a target for the ghosts he had spent 30 years running from. And Caspian, in his desperation to remain the Golden Son, was willing to sell our father to the highest bidder just to get back into a suit. "Drive to the Vesper Heights site," I commanded. "Now." Vesper Heights was silent now, no longer filled with the clinking of gala glasses. But as I walked into the Grand Library, I wasn't alone. A man stood by the fireplace, his back to me. He was tall, dressed in a sharp charcoal gray coat that looked like armor. "The architecture here is stolen," the man said without turning around. His voice was a deep baritone, echoing with a decade of resentment. "My father drew these lines in a small office with a broken heater. Your father built them in a palace." "Victor Thorne?" I said, standing my ground. He turned around. His eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with a sharp intelligence that my brother never possessed. "Sloan Blackwood. Or is it Sterling now? I've heard quite a bit about the family failure, who became the city's most ruthless landlord. You've done my work for me. You've humiliated Garrick more than I ever could. If you're here to thank me, you can leave the way you came, I said. I'm not here to thank you. Victor stepped closer, his presence filling the room. Your brother Caspian came to me with a very interesting proposition. He told me about the blueprints. He told me that you have proof of my father's murder. He offered to testify against Garrick in exchange for a position in my new firm and a return to his rightful status. Caspian is a fool, I said, my heart sinking. He doesn't realize that you'll discard him the moment he's no longer useful. Oh, I know, Victor smiled, a dark, predatory expression. But here's the problem, Sloan. I don't just want Garrick in jail. I want the Blackwood name erased from this city. I want this estate razed to the ground. And since you now own the debt, the firm, and the house, that means I have to go through you. Are you threatening me, Victor? I'm offering you a choice, he countered. Hand over the blueprints and the coroner's testimony. Join me in a joint lawsuit that will strip every asset your father ever touched. I'll let you keep a small percentage of the holding company as a consultation fee. Or I can release the story to the press tonight. How the great Sloane Sterling is actually the daughter of a murderer, using blood money to buy up the city. Your investors will flee. Your banks will freeze. You'll be right back where you started 15 years ago. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the reflection of my own ambition in his eyes. He was what I would have become if I had let the bitterness consume me. My father is a thief and a coward, Victor, I said quietly. But the people who work for Blackwood Architecture are innocent. The buildings he built are homes to thousands. If you burn the name, you burn the city's stability. I won't let you do that just for a 20-year-old grudge. Then you've made your choice, Victor said, pulling a phone from his pocket. By tomorrow morning, the Sterling name will be as toxic as Blackwood. I hope you enjoyed being the landlord while it lasted. He walked past me, the scent of expensive sandalwood lingering in the air. Silas, I called out as soon as the door closed. Silas appeared from the hallway, looking concerned. I heard everything. He's going to trigger a market panic. Let him, I said, my mind racing. We have 12 hours. Get me a meeting with the district attorney. Not as a landlord, but as a witness. And call the studio apartment. Tell my father it's time to stop staring at the wall. He has one chance to save his son from a life of treason, and he has to do it by telling the truth. What about Caspian? Silas asked. Caspian thinks he's playing the game, I said, looking at the original blueprints on the desk. But he forgot the first rule of real estate. Never sell a property you don't own. It's time to show the world that the only thing stronger than a stolen legacy is the truth that burns it down. The rain lashed against the windows of the district attorney's office, mirroring the storm brewing in the city's financial district. News of Victor Thorne's return had already sent ripples through the market, and the whispers of a Blackwood blood scandal were beginning to turn into a roar. I sat in the cold, sterile waiting room, my hands clasped in my lap. Beside me sat Garrick. He looked smaller, his skin sallow in the fluorescent light, but for the first time in 15 years, his eyes were clear. He wasn't looking for a way out anymore. He was looking at the daughter he had spent a lifetime dismissing. Why are you doing this, Sloane? He asked, his voice a gravelly whisper. You have everything. You won. You could let Victor destroy me and walk away with your billions intact. Because I didn't build my empire to be a shadow of yours, Dad, I said, not looking at him. I built it to be better. If I let Victor burn the city down just to get to you, I'm no better than the man who stole those blueprints 30 years ago. The door opened. Silas stepped out, nodding to us. The DA is ready, and Victor Thorne is already inside. He brought his own witness. We walked into the room. Victor was sitting at the long oak table, looking like a king in exile. And next to him, looking terrified yet desperate, was Caspian. Ah, the family reunion, Victor sneered, tapping a digital recorder on the table. Just in time for the confession. Caspian has been very helpful, Sloane. He's detailed exactly how Garrick managed to inherit my father's brilliance. I did what I had to do, Caspian burst out, his voice cracking. Sloane was going to leave us with nothing. Victor promised me a future. A future as a puppet, Caspian, I said, taking a seat directly across from Victor. But you're missing a key piece of information. You think Victor wants justice? He wants a monopoly. He's already signed a secret agreement to sell the Blackwood assets to a foreign conglomerate the moment the firm collapses. Victor's smirk didn't waver. Business is business, Sloan. Now, shall we get to the murder? Or should I let the DA read the coroner's report you so kindly unearthed? Garrick stood up then. He didn't look at Victor. He looked at the district attorney. Elias Thorne didn't die of a heart attack, he began, his voice steadying. But I didn't kill him. The room went silent. Caspian gasped, and even Victor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Elias had a congenital heart defect he kept secret from the board, Garrick continued. The night we argued over the Grand Central Plaza, he collapsed. I panicked. I knew that if he died and the project was tied up in probate, the firm would go under. So, I moved his body. I bribed the coroner to list the time of death 12 hours later, after I had signed the partnership transfer. I stole his work, yes. I built my life on a lie. But I loved that man like a brother. I didn't kill him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver flash drive. This is the original security footage from the office that night. I've kept it for 30 years. It shows the collapse. It shows my cowardice. And it shows that there was no murder. Only a theft of a legacy. Victor's face contorted with rage. You expect us to believe a thief? The footage is forensic grade, Victor, Silas interrupted, sliding a laptop toward the DA. And we've already had it verified. Your murder case is dead. What remains is a fraud case, one that Garrick is pleading guilty to today. I looked at Victor. The blueprints stay with the Thorne family. The awards will be posthumously returned to Elias, but the firm stays intact under my management. If you try to trigger a market panic now, Victor, you'll be doing it without a scandal to back you up. You'll just be another shark trying to kill a healthy company. The DA won't like that. Neither will the press. Victor stared at me for a long time, the silence stretching until it was unbearable. Then, without a word, he stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out. He knew when he'd been outplayed. Caspian tried to stand, his face a mask of shame. Sloan, I didn't know about the footage. You thought only of yourself, Caspian, I said, my voice cold. Victor is gone, and so is your seat at the table. You'll be lucky if the board doesn't sue you for collusion. As the room cleared, only Garrick and I remained. The DA's assistants were processing the paperwork for his house arrest and the massive fines that would strip him of his remaining wealth. You saved me, he said, looking at the floor. After everything, why? I didn't save you, Garrick, I said, standing up and smoothing my black dress. I saved the truth. And I saved the girl who used to sit in a library dreaming of a home where she didn't have to lie to be loved. You're going back to that studio apartment. You're going to spend the rest of your life making sure Elias Thorne's name is the one on the plaques. That's your sentence. I walked out of the office and into the lobby of Vesper Heights one last time. It was my house now, truly mine. The ghosts were gone, replaced by a legacy that was finally, painfully, honest. I looked at the gold-embossed invitation from 2 weeks ago, still sitting on the marble console. I tore it into pieces and let them fall like snow onto the floor. I wasn't the family failure anymore. I wasn't even the landlord. I was the architect of my own life. And for the first time in 33 years, the foundation was solid. And that is the end of the Blackwood era. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't a loud shout. It's a silent, successful climb. Sloan proved that being a failure in the eyes of toxic people is often a sign that you're doing something right. Have you ever had to cut ties to save yourself, only to come back stronger than anyone imagined? Or has life ever forced you to learn that your boundaries are your greatest asset? Let's talk about it in the comments. I read every single one. If Sloan's victory gave you a bit of strength today, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with a friend who needs a reminder of their own power. There are more stories like this in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.